Thank you. All right. Hi, everybody. So, again, my name is Nicole Rodriguez, and I was asked to talk about stress and anxiety toolkit, grounding techniques, and other strategies to maintain your optimal well being. So, just a little bit about me. I'm not going to go in too much detail and read this verbatim, but I grew up in Westfield. I went to Westfield High School and I graduated from Westfield State. And I started my career off in the criminal justice field because I thought that's what I wanted to do. And throughout my time with going to Westfield State and learning a little bit more about kind of what impacts society and where we are today, I decided to go down the mental health route. So I've had some experience. I have my bachelor's and master's from Westfield State University. I have postmasters from Simmons Springfield College, and I have some Westfield State University postmasters. I have worked in the child protection field. I did that for 18 years. I was a mental health specialist, and then I transitioned to still working in the mental health field for the state through the Department of Mental Health. I specialize working with adolescents. I am the person who, when everybody wants to run away from the teenagers, I run towards them. I'm not sure why, but I do. And I really enjoy being with them. So it's my passion to work with adolescents and transitional age youth. I don't know that there's always a lot of support for kids out there. And so I just want to give people tools and help them be the best people that they can be. So, what is the difference between stress and anxiety? I'm going to ask that people put some of this into the chat. What do you think is the difference between it? Like when you're feeling stress or you're feeling anxiety, I know that this says stress and anxiety are often used interchangeably, but which is understandable. There is a fine line between stress and anxiety. Both are emotional responses, and the symptoms are very similar. So, does anybody have any ideas?
What happened to
It's getting burned. The fish.
what it is?
Yeah.
The flame wasn't low enough?
Okay, so I'll move on. So, sorry, my screen's not working. I apologize. Okay, so stress is a normal reaction to everyday pressures, but can become unhealthy when it impacts you and it impacts your daily functioning. It involves changes that affect nearly every system in your body. So when we talk about stress, it's very similar to anxiety in the way it manifests. But stress is often caused by like an external trigger, such as like school or work, having a deadline, a fight with a loved one or a friend. And when you think about stress, you really think about a deadline or something that you have to do. There's peer pressure, there's school expectations, chronic illness is sometimes stress. Even for kids or youth that are struggling, you might be playing a sport, you have a break, you break your foot and you have to go through the season without that. That's chronic. So that can be chronic stress and money. Even for adolescents, money is stressful. It's prom time, people are getting dresses, people are doing things. So that's just some other ways to talk about stress. I have a video that I'm going to share with you about stress in school.
Hear my alarm waking me up for school, and I dread getting out of bed. I have more than I need. I am fed every day, I live in a wonderful house in a beautiful city, and I attend a good school, yet I still don't want to go. It is so easy to find the negatives of school. Things like stress and lack of interest in my classes are just some of the negatives that overpower the good. Yet at the perspective of another, their opinion would be completely different. Imagine a 14-year-old girl living in an African country. Her name is Adisa, and is part of a family of 6 living in a one-room house. She would give anything to have the opportunity to learn, but her family can't afford it. To her, school would not be the terrible monster that I see. She would find the positives. She would see school as a way to make new friends and learn about the world around her. Thinking about Adisa and others in her situation made me feel very guilty. Here I am, complaining about my life when I have everything I need and more, while she would only dream of living a life like mine. I have been told to be successful in life, I have to succeed in school. I have been told to get into a good college, I have to make good grades and participate in as many school activities as possible.
Mhm.
The way I see it, putting that much pressure on yourself to make good grades and participate in every school activity is not the best high school experience. For me, this just adds to the pressure and anxiety, making it more difficult to learn. I struggle with stress, and the pressure on
TED Talk.
having the best grades is always present. I was thinking about what the number 4.0 actually means to me, and I stumbled to answer. What does it mean? It has to mean something if I'm putting myself through so much to get it. I'm one who strives to do my best, and the pressure and anxiety is making me question why. Why am I putting so much pressure on myself that I struggle to go to school? Stress about the workload, pressure on making good grades. It's a lot, even for me who has never found school to be very difficult. I don't find myself struggling very often, but that doesn't make it any easier. If anything, it makes it more difficult. Many don't see how that could be the case. I've had several conversations where someone will say something along the lines of, if you're so good at school, why don't you like it? This question and the many different variations I have heard continue to confuse me. How does working hard to perform well in school take away the stress or dislike? If I know from personal experience, it just adds to the stress and dislike. I put myself through this so I have more opportunities to live a successful life, and I'm trying to understand why. When I hear my alarm waking me up for school, I get ready in a tired daze. I'm walking into a day filled with 7 hours of learning. Yikes. 7 hours of boredom, frustration, and judgment. I have many classes that take so much energy to keep from falling asleep. People that feel that because it's a group project, they don't have to do any of the work. Presentations that make me shake with nervousness. Peers that feel the need to make others feel bad about themselves. Add all of this to the stress, and you're looking at the definition of misery. I look at school and see a bubble of negativity, yet at the perspective of another, their opinion would be completely different. Adisa would see school and go to school and be over the moon excited. She would want to experience all the different classes and different subjects. She wouldn't be so focused on the grades because she would be so much more interested in the actual learning. She would try her best to succeed and only see the stress as a small side effect of school. I try to have this perspective about school, especially because I am so incredibly lucky to have all that I do, but it is a constant struggle. I tell myself to think about school in the perspective of Adisa, who would give anything to take my place. I find the positives because that is what she would do. She would work with the situation, even if she doesn't like everything about it. And I feel like this should be easier to do than it actually is, but it's not. I challenge you to think about your life from the perspective of someone who would give anything to take your place. Find the positives and encourage others to do the same. Know that it's only a portion of your life and it's not the worst thing you could be doing. I know it can be hard. Trust me, I struggle with it every day. Just remember, don't take anything for granted and embrace the stuff you don't like, because there is someone out there who would give anything to take your place.
So I wanted to share that video because I think sometimes when we think about stress and we think about like youth, we often think that people wear their stress on their sleeve. And we'll look at kids who might be higher functioning and kids who are achieving good grades and doing really well, functioning in multiple groups. And we might not think that this applies to them. And so the reason I chose this video was to just highlight that there could be somebody who's doing so well, but inside they're really struggling. So it can be silent. And I just got that. Thank you, Tanya. Stress goes away after an event. Anxiety comes and goes throughout the day, week, or month, and that's true. So okay. So anxiety. Anxiety is an emotion described by feelings of intense, excessive, persistent worry and fear about daily situations. So people who experience anxiety, it's the doom and gloom. It's the worst that you get, you can't get out of it, and sometimes it's really hard to talk yourself out of it. They can have panic attacks that are repeated episodes of sudden feelings of severe anxiety and fear and terror, which takes minutes. So anxiety doesn't always cause panic attacks, but it can cause panic attacks. And when you're in a panic attack, it's really hard to kind of collect your thoughts and get out of that. So I wanted to share another video, and I promise this whole presentation will not be videos, but for the first few slides, I thought that it would be important to hear the youth perspective on anxiety? Mm, I'm sorry, this is not working. I'll open a different one. It's not, I don't know why it's not working. I apologize. Try one more time.
Thank you so much for having me.
I don't know. It's not, can you hear the volume? No,
I was
right?
in middle school when I had my
Okay.
first bout with anxiety. It began when I struggled with the pressure of being on a sports team. Being constantly compared to others caused a pit in my stomach that kept rising. I was scared and uncomfortable. Soon my parents picked up on my anxiety and had me talk to a therapist. I'd walk into therapy and she would ask me, "How are you doing?" And I'd be like, "I'm great." Then a few days would pass and it would hit hard. I'd experience an anxiety attack while out with my family or in English class, and I didn't know what to do because I didn't have any guidance at that very moment. I could be completely still, and inside my body would be racing. The contradiction between being physically still and mentally speeding is terrifying. Dissolving the anxiety feels impossible. The spontaneous attacks are the worst of all because I am blindsided and have little ability to recover. I feel separated from everyone. I can't speak, I can't listen, I can't focus. Anxiety shows up without any advanced warning. Unlike most activities in our life, anxiety does not work on a schedule. Wondering when anxiety will show up can cause even more anxiety. I had to find a way to cope. My therapist taught me to fill in the gaps because anxiety would show up on and on its own schedule, and I had to be prepared to deal with it. I knew I had to turn to something I enjoyed in order to cope. I love to write. As a child, my father always influenced me to write my own story. In middle school, I wrote letters to my future self in a diary. Today, I run the features section in our student-ran newspaper, La Vista, where I interview students, staff, and alumni about their hobbies they've turned into passions. Whether it is through creating a fashion brand, a business, or having a sponsorship, everyone I have talked to has had a moment of fear or anxiety in the thought that this isn't going to work out. Anyone who sets out to live a full life will experience anxiety. No matter the age or person, they've felt this anxiety and probably still do, but they've learned to live with it. Anxiety is normal. Whether it is temporary or a lifelong struggle, most of us has dealt with it. I was not alone. Last year for the paper, I interviewed a MiraCosta alumni who just published a children's book. She talked to me about how the creativity of writing helped her feel free. She had a hard time finding her way in college, overcome with confusion and fear of failure. She could never find the right fit, switching colleges several times. Writing, she told me, was a therapeutic way to experience a release from a negative mindset. Hearing how she uses writing as a distraction and a passion really opened up my perspective about my own difficulties. I decided to experiment and use writing to help me when I experienced anxiety and depression. In the beginning, I didn't know what to write, but as the words began to flow, I began acknowledging feelings I'd been pushing down. If I experienced uneasiness, even queasiness, I'd write about it. If I felt guilty for having anxiety, I'd write about it. If I felt like everyone else was handling their anxiety way better than me, I'd write about it. Writing allowed me to look at my feelings as a third person. And just as a friend might tell you that you're being too hard on yourself, or it only looks like people are handling their anxiety well, writing allowed me to look at the absurdity and the high standards I set for myself. Writing opens up my heart and relinquishes the pit in my stomach that tells me I am not good enough, or I will make the wrong decision. As I write more and more, it's like exercise. Maybe I don't want to get started, but as I move the pen across the page, I feel stronger. I feel proud of myself. I feel accomplished. The actual content of what I write is less important than writing itself. I've kept writing. It is powerful to me, and I see it has the power to calm me down and clear my mind. I use writing when anxiety catches me by surprise, although it is hard to diverge my mind and body from the tornadoes of feelings, or the fear that has no basis in reality but feels very real, or the overwhelming insecurity that plagues my confidence. Writing has been a gift. I use writing when anxiety catches me by surprise, and writing has saved me. Have you found your antidote to anxiety? Maybe it's right under your nose waiting to help you. Do you like to go for a run or go watch the waves crash on the ocean? Do you like to read a book or go on a walk? Writing is my outlet, my release. Next time you feel an onset of anxiety, instead of turning to self-doubt, sit with it and try to find a passion to distract yourself. Every day, take a moment and look at the people around you and the impact you have on others. There's always some problem that needs to be solved, but find a little peace in the present and the joy you bring to others. Most of all, remember to be kind to yourself and do what you love. You may surprise yourself with all you can do. Thank you.
So I just thought that was a really important video to kind of think about how people manage anxiety and what that looks like. And also that it's not a one size fits all. Anxiety looks very different for a bunch of different people. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the common physical symptoms of stress and anxiety. So just the feeling of nervousness and restlessness a lot often when I meet with kids and I'm working with kids as an individual therapist. I'll meet with them and I'll be like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening to me. But what I know is that I start to get sweaty or I start to get cold or they start to talk about the physical symptoms of what the anxiety is. And that's how we're able to narrow down this is anxiety and this is why. We look at patterns of like behavior and patterns of where people go and are there certain situations that people are more anxious in and how can we build support around that, but it's really identifying how people know that they're experiencing anxiety. So having an increased heart rate, breathing rapidly, hyperventilating, that can turn into the panic attacks. You have the perspiring and the trembling. You can feel weak, trouble concentrating. So oftentimes people who are very anxious, they'll have a hard time concentrating. Sometimes they'll be in the middle of something and they'll be like, "Oh, I lost that train of thought. Okay, hold on one second, I'll get back to it." Sometimes they can grab it out of the air, sometimes you can't. Um, Problems with sleep and experiencing with like GI, your stomach can really bother you if you're dealing with that. And then difficulty controlling worries and then urges to avoid things. So, one of the big things that people think with anxiety is to avoid the stressor. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get further into this. But that is not something that we should be looking at. I have one last video just to show it's where kids talk about stress, anxiety, and mental health. And I thought it was really impactful to hear from a bunch of kids what that looks like. And bear with me, I'm also going to cut and paste this just in case.
Um, Depression, um, and anxiety, and also just feeling like I'm not good enough, feeling like people aren't going to accept me for what I am.
Sadness, stress, depression, anger.
Being anxious, anxiety, fear, anger, and frustration.
Anxiety and embarrassment are the top of the list of very intense emotions that I deal with.
Well, I had anger and heartbreak were the main ones.
Being insecure about myself, like the way I look and like my body size.
Like I usually just like keep to myself kind of. I'm not really like joking around or anything like that.
I feel sick to my stomach and as if nothing can go right.
I feel like just like alone, and I feel like nobody can understand what I'm going through. It just kind of feels like I'm like this twig that's a walking twig that just goes anywhere and everywhere.
It's just like emptiness, like a gap, like kind of just like is gone away from my body or something.
You just want to scream, and it's like your life is all one big puzzle.
I get shaky and my stomach gets sick and my mind is jumping to the worst case scenarios and it's all over the place, jumping to conclusions.
My mind kind of like clamps together in a way, and I can't like pick out each and every thought that I can because it just swirls around and I can't like grab it and trying to work through it.
My heart is racing. I can't speak really clearly. I'm like kind of sweaty and just kind of not looking too great.
I like just get really paranoid and don't know what to do.
Sometimes it's like I get like this knot in my throat because I know that what I feeling I can't express it or you can't say it.
I want to punch everything around me. Like I want to punch a wall, a bed, and
And when I take pictures of myself, I kind of use a black and white filter to tell me that everything will look the same and nothing will change.
Take some deep breaths and listen to music and talking to someone about it usually helps.
I listen to music, often music that either has to do with the things that I'm feeling or music that will make me feel the opposite of what I'm feeling. And I tell myself that whatever I'm feeling or going through, it's all going to get better and that it will end eventually.
I try to just think positive, have positive thoughts, and say I can get through it. Or I just try to just breathe and just relax.
I usually like write a poem or like I'll try to figure out some kind of jazz chords to play on my piano to like mellow my mood a little bit. So
I try to remind myself that I'm not the only one who feels this way. I try to pull myself down to make everything go away.
So I wanted to share that because I felt like that was really impactful coming from kids and what they're experiencing and where their source of like anxiety is. And when you talk about big emotions, you're looking at kids and big emotions, and that's how we explain some of these emotions for even high school students. Like their emotions are so big. And I know I got a question about, which I'll get to later, just about kind of the feelings around anxiety and when there's not outlets to manage them. How can we support them in a school setting? How can we support kids at home to manage these feelings? Does anybody have any responses or did any of those things really resonate with you? Have you seen this in your children or in other people's kids that you've really kind of experienced some of these symptoms of anxiety and or yourself? And you can either put it in the chat or I don't know if people want to raise hands and come off me. I don't know if there's hands, but well, I'll keep going, and if anybody wants to add anything, please feel free to do so. So there's a list of anxiety disorders, and I'm not going to get too in depth to that with this, but there are certain anxiety disorders that you can be diagnosed with. So separation anxiety disorder, specific phobia disorder, social phobia disorder, panic disorder, agoraphobia, and generalized anxiety disorder. Alexa, pause. Sorry, she gives me NFL updates at 7:30. So
Nicole Tanya asked if you could please repeat the question.
Yeah, it was so what I was saying is from the previous videos, is there anything within those last few videos that I showed that anybody has any strong feelings about, or have you seen your children experience that stuff that you kind of just want to talk about or share? Any comments about it? So during COVID, my son feels overwhelmed with schoolwork not being perfect or good enough. He will express anger and bad. So I think honestly, during COVID was a really, really hard time. And I think we're seeing a lot more stress and anxiety than we ever have before. And there was, I believe, and I think this is true for work, and I could say that, and probably everybody can resonate with this. We're required to do a lot more with a lot less time because now we're virtual. So that has perpetuated a lot of anxiety, and I think because the expectations rose because we were so accessible during COVID, that really impacts, um, people's self-worth and what is good. So I think that people have kinda driven themselves to the highest level during anxiety where it's like, I talk to kids and it's like, okay to get a 3.9. That works. Yeah, sports can be a huge stressor. Deep breaths and yep. And that's good. It's about prioritizing things and looking at what would really work for kids. It's a lot. And I think sometimes we look and we see, our kids and we're like, "Okay, well, they only have school and they only have this because we're adults and we're managing all of our kids' schedule and everything else." But their peer relationships are still forming and their relationships are still forming, and they're trying to find themselves navigate through this world that's completely lost, and then on top of it, everything else. The couple of things that I want to point out about the anxiety disorders is separation anxiety and generalized anxiety look different. And so I work with a couple of people where like some parents have experienced like anxiety, generalized anxiety, but not really special like separation anxiety or social anxiety. And it is very different. Like, social anxiety is being more hypervigilant about where you are around you. These are some youth that take, like, they kinda will map out where they're gonna go or do a quick look at where they're gonna go. They see people as more kind of coming towards them and judging them even if they're not even being, like, looked at. The perception is that all eyes on me for that. So that's just something to kind of think about. Um, the other thing is so there's a list of trauma and stress related disorders. I wanted to put this up here. It is not anything that like stress is stress, but not a lot of people I don't see a lot of like the disinhibited social engagement disorder. Reactive attachment disorder is a big one. And that's, when you are forming your attachment at the early years of life, you have a secure base through like Bowlby, and so your parents, you'll see toddlers like often go away, look back at their parent or their secure base, go away. And so reactive attachment disorder is kind of through that lens where there has to be some sort of safety in that. And I do think that it's kids who have reactive attachment disorder take it out sometimes on the biggest attachment that they have. So if you're the parent or the caregiver, that's where they take out a lot of the stuff on that caregiver. Post-traumatic stress disorder. I know I have a question about that a little later. That is essentially you had an acute trauma that has happened, and that is shaping the way you're seeing your environment. So you're living through like the lens of stress and repeated like unsafety. That then the criteria like happens within 6 months. It impacts your executive functioning to the point where it's impacting your daily functioning. Acute stress disorder, and then there's an adjustment disorder that I see a lot of. So adjustment disorder happens at times where people have to make some adjustments. So it'll be kids coming, like, if you have a family and they've moved around a lot, they're adjusting to certain things. But big pieces about life adjustments and stressors is think of when people are transitioning schools, right? So middle school to high school, elementary school to middle school, high school to college. That's a lot of adjusting and trying to get to know things in new and like just the way new schools work and new systems. So you can only, if you're in therapy, you can only be diagnosed with adjustment disorder for the first 6 months. And that's often just when somebody's trying to figure out what you have. Prolonged grief disorder, and then there's other specified trauma and stress related disorders. I don't really think that like if you have a basic amount of stress, you don't usually get these, you don't be diagnosed with these disorders. So I wanted to share a couple of scenarios just regarding and just get an idea of where you think people are. So I just was reading the chat too. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep up on that. So Tanya said those videos were very realistic. The children I work with have different ways they feel anxiety, and hearing actual teens talk about it allows us to picture it in our heads. Yeah, so I think that's important. I think one of the things too is so different. Everybody presents so differently with this, and anxiety can present. If you look at all of the symptoms of anxiety, there's symptoms of depression and there's symptoms like of stress. They all can kind of be together. They all can be one little ball of we got to figure out what's going on. So I would just be very mindful of that. So I have 3 scenarios that I just want to run through real quickly and kind of get some feedback on if you think these kids are doing well, how you feel they're doing. So hi, I'm a junior at a local high school in the Pioneer Valley. I play basketball and softball. I'm a member of the National Honor Society and just set up my classes for next year, which will put me in the running to be the valedictorian. I'm the president of Closet Forgiving, Special Friends Club, and vice president of mentoring program at my high school. I also participate in educating youth and substance use prevention through the district attorney's office, which requires me to travel to other schools and talk to youth about the dangers of substance use. I work for my family business when I have free time, and I have a younger sister that I help provide rides to and from places. I have a great relationship with my sister and my mother, who I live with. People say I laugh a lot, which I do, and I'm seen as outgoing and bubbly to others. So just looking at this scenario and thinking about it, how would you rate her level of anxiety through this? Like, do you think she's functioning well and there's not a lot of it at all? Or would you think this would be a kid that would be on your radar to worry about any of that? So what I'll share is I did shift a little some things around, but this is one of, okay, got a chat. I would worry about her. Seems like an overachiever. Okay. Yeah, she's a super overachiever. She's definitely an overachiever. Um, and she struggles with being the overachiever and her relationship with her mother regarding like the responsibilities that she chooses to take on herself, and also being a child, which causes her relationship. Oh, her father is deceased. I'm sorry, I didn't mention her relationship with her father. Her father's deceased. He passed away when she was very, very young. Um, One of the things I also want to remind us of is like when you're young, when you're little, you're looking at an informative play and you're looking at free play. I talk to this youth all the time about having some unstructured time. What does unstructured time look like, and how do you really use that? What she does to unwind, she works a lot, so she has a lot of stuff. She goes to like sporting events and stuff like that. But I do get very worried about her, and it nobody in her family saw this, that she sought help for anxiety. Everybody thought she was just going along doing whatever. She's second in her class. And so I think, like I said, that's just very important to kind of keep a note of. Thank you for your participation. And one more chat. Yeah, huge schedule, definitely stressful. Okay, so scenario. Sorry. All these things. So I'm a senior at a local high school in the Pioneer Valley. I'm in the final days of deciding where I'm going to go to college next year, which has been exciting and scary. I struggle in social situations with a lot of people. Last year, I experienced racism at my school, and as a result, I supported enacting a policy change on how these situations are managed. I am a strong advocate for what I believe in and run a closet at school where clothes are donated to kids so they can get what they need. I'm a volunteer for Make-A-Wish Foundation. I work part-time at a local store in town where I go to when I go in public, I prepare for my outing. I have been at a restaurant. If I have to go to a restaurant, I map it out where I'll sit to face the door. I take note of who is looking at me when I arrive. I have overwhelmed feelings of being unsafe in the community and utilize a lot of self-talk to manage my symptoms. My mother also struggles with anxiety, so she thinks she knows how I feel. But she says that I seem calm, and I do see calm on the outside, but on the inside, I'm 100 miles a minute. My mom supports me the best she can. I'm often told my face is mean and I don't look nice. My friends would describe me as considerate, supportive, and caring. So, what do you see in this? And do you think this kid is doing better than the first kid? She definitely has social anxiety. Yes, she does. She's unique because she has a lot going on, but she also enacts a lot of change for people. So she's like responsible for putting that policy in. She's very self-aware. So this kid, I worry about less than the first kid that I see. And the reason why is she has skills and abilities and strategies that she utilizes when she goes out to make her feel safe. She surrounds herself with people that understand how she feels. So if she needs an out, she can kind of give a look, like she always has a plan. And she's very prepared when she's like scouting at certain things. But one of the things that was like that got in between her and her mother, which was it just shows you how anxiety is very different, is her mom would drive her to school in the morning, but her mom would be late if she went all the way through the circle to her high school. So she would try to always drop her off across the street from the high school so this youth could walk into the high school. And her mom would get into very big arguments about that. And the result of that was we ended up having a conversation with her mom, and we basically said, like, that's just too hard for her right now. And that's something she can't do because the second she gets out of the car, all eyes are on her and she gets frozen and paralyzed. Okay. And then I just have one more scenario. So I'm an eighth grader attending a private school in town I do not live in. My parents worked hard to save up money and move into a school district that's highly rated so my siblings and I could get a better education and attend public high school. Prior to moving, we attended private school. Well, when we arrived at the new school, I knew it was going to be hard, but I did not anticipate how hard it was going to be. I struggled to make friends, and I understood that I played a part in that. I was easily irritated at school because the work was different and I was not used to the expectations. After multiple meetings with the new school, my parents made the decision to send me back to private school. I was excited for this move. The classes are smaller. They are more appropriate to receive the help that I do not have to ask for. In general, the school is calmer. My parents are divorced and very supportive. They communicate well and are both with new partners who are also cool. I like riding dirt bikes and a few other things. I don't really hang out with anyone, and most of my time is spent at home on video games, just in my room and sometimes with my parents and siblings. I would like I would say I have friends, but my family doesn't think so. What do you think about that, kid? How worried would you be about them? He needs to adjustment disorder. So he did struggle and he tried to adjust to the school system for about, I would say, maybe 3 months, and he just couldn't do it, and he ended up going back. I am worried about him with the lack of peer engagement and his anxiety. He presents as very calm, but inside he's very anxious. Um, the thing that doesn't make me as worried is that he does have a strong connection with his family. He does have a connection, like he rides a dirt bike with his father on the weekends. And they are also aware and are trying to foster avenues in which he can have community connection, which is a huge thing for him. So just wanted to provide like 3 different scenarios because I think sometimes when we think of people with anxiety and depression, we get like those animated pictures of us like things thrown everywhere, desks are all a mess, and it's not always that. It's some people who hold it together so well. We just need to kind of see that where they're at. So, responses to stress and anxiety, and it's a fight, flight, freeze response. So, this is the way that the involuntary, like the body perceives danger, and these are responses that happen when you are in a terrifying situations. It could be for a car coming onto you, it could be like you're gonna get run down by an animal, whatever you see as danger in the moment, your nervous system will respond very differently to different things. So, fight. This is when a person takes an act to stop eliminating the danger. So these are the kids that when you think of like your window of tolerance and you think of your anxiety and you feel like you're at a lower anxiety and you're within this little window of tolerance, and then they get up and they go up and up and up and get out of that window of tolerance of anxiety. They cannot access their words in the moment. so they're fighting. These are the kids that they might physically act out, but it's also like, picture yourself walking into a class where you weren't aware that there was a test being administered. You try to talk to your teacher, they say you still must take it. Your jaw gets tight, your face starts to get flush, you sweat, and your fists clench. You know that hitting the teacher would be wrong, but you can't help feeling this way. Doesn't always play out so nice like this. Sometimes kids do act out their behavior, but that is an example of fight. Flight is when a person flees to avoid danger. But this isn't like I'm cognizantly like really aware and it's like, hey, we have danger coming over here. I'm going to avoid it. Let's go. They just take off. And in the midst of taking off in danger, sometimes we always don't look to see if there's oncoming traffic or anything like that. So you can think of like a kid, we can think of like a child in a program who in a sense, or at school, perceives an incredible danger at school, does not have the ability to access verbal communication at that point, and just takes off and you don't know where they're going. That would be the flight response. And then the freeze. So this happens when you can't fight, when you can't flee. And you will hear that people are like disassociating, or people will say like they're there but they're not, like I can't really see, like it's kind of like if you go in front of them and they're like this, but they're not blinking and they're not responding to you. So looking at the scenario where you were unaware of the test, what if you couldn't go to take the test and you just froze? I'm not sure if anybody, like I remember taking my LI, my licensing tests after you get in grad school. They just educate you to take all these tests and pay more money. And I remember really trying to read through it and thinking like, oh my gosh, I have to take a test that's like 200 and something questions. And at times I froze. At times I was really like, I don't know that I can do this. And I think this is a reality that happens sometimes. So some of these kids, like you'll see that they get a really, really high grade and maybe they're not as prepared for something else and they just freeze up. And so maybe that's the test grade that's like a C or a D opposed to like the average of an A or a B. So physical feelings associated with the fight, flight, freeze, common symptoms of stress. So it's the increased heart rate, the blood pressure, the heavy breathing, the paler flushed skin. It's everything that we kind of talked about before. It's diluted pupils to take in more light, being aware and hypervigilant. People are very hypervigilant and very aware. You can have involuntary movements and you can have the inability to control your bowels. At some time. So you'll have like a stress response where you can like pee on yourself. Like I knew a girl who went to get her nose pierced and she was so stressed out about getting her nose pierced. When she actually got it pierced, she passed out and urinated on herself. And so that was just something that, and I was in college when that happened. So I had no idea that's really what it was. Ways to manage anxiety. So I'm going to skip that other video. So certain ways to manage anxiety, good sleep hygiene. That is one thing that none of us think about. Think about your children. They're probably playing sports depending on what season it is, right? Soccer is a late sport, football is a late sport, basketball can be a late sport. You're playing under the lights, baseball, whatever. They come home, it's 9 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night after a game. Then they have to settle down. If there's any homework that they didn't get done in between that or whatever activity they have to then do the homework and then go to bed. They're probably not shutting their brains off till 11 or 12 at night. And then that's when you communicate with your friends. That's when you have the social media. That's when you take your phone and you do all this stuff. So sleep hygiene is huge. And that's what I talk to a lot of kids about. Consistent exercise can help you manage your anxiety. Mindfulness and meditation practices, prioritizing self-care, journaling. We heard the girl about journaling, breathing habits, healthy eating habits. Counseling and therapy can also help. Medications at times. And limiting caffeine and alcohol consumption and limiting vaping and use of substances. So a very big thing when I talk with kids in therapy is they will outline vaping as being a stress relief for them. So it's sad, but they will. And a lot of youth do that. So it's just kind of being able to find what can we replace with that? How can we make that different? So what we want to talk about is a toolkit. And when you think of a toolkit, what do you think of? In mental health, what we think of is we think of for this, it's a stress and anxiety toolkit. And I did two. I did physical mental health symptoms of a toolkit and non-tangible mental health symptoms, because there's two separate kits that you can kind of do. So the physical mental health toolkit is physical objects to distract yourself. So this would be like, I have some kids that will like have like a little pouch that they'll carry around in their bag when they go to school, and they'll have fidget spinners. They'll have a Pop-It, any other fidget toys. There's a bunch of them that you can get at like Target, Walmart for like nothing. And then drawing pads, coloring books, crayons, pencils, anything to make jewelry, string, beads, nail polish, puzzles, word games, any of that stuff. It's just distraction. It's to take your mind completely away from that and put it somewhere else. If the use of calming teas, essential oils, and then a big thing for kids in school and out of school is also using music, headphones, and video games. That can be some help. Non-tangible mental health toolkit could be like meditation, using your five senses. So like in the moment, you're out of your window of tolerance, you don't know how to get yourself back down. Use your five senses. What can you smell? What can you see? What can you hear? And hone in on that. So like, I'm going to count 5 gray things right now in front of me. I'm going to count the ceiling tiles. I'm going to smell because maybe I put cologne or perfume on. Take a break. It's okay to take a break. Self-talk. So you have to get your mind out of it. So what it is, it's like this, I've done this before. I can do this again. I do self-talk every time I go to the dentist. I hate the dentist. So all I do is wake up and start with self-talk right in that morning. Positive affirmations. So this is kind of weird and people don't always like to say, hey, I'm really good, or hey, this is great, but that's helpful. Yoga, walking, and then full body scans is just really checking in with yourself. How do you feel? What does that look like? So I just have a few questions about myths about anxiety and stress. And I just want to see if people can put some answers in the chat, and I'll leave a few minutes left for any questions and to answer the questions that there were. So anxiety is not an illness. True or false? Correct. It is an illness. Oh, okay. Sorry, it was very delayed and then it went really fast. And now it's not working at all. Okay, so anxiety will go away on its own. What do you think? Okay, false. Yeah, stress usually goes away on its own. Anxiety is here to stay for a little while. People with anxiety should avoid stressful situations. I already answered that earlier, so you don't have to, but that's one of the biggest myths, is that people with anxiety should avoid stressful situations, and that's not the case at all. Anxiety disorders are not common. For the sake of time, I'll just say they are common. They're the most common disorders that we have. Medication is the only treatment for anxiety disorders. And this is truly what people think when they come to see me sometimes. And that is also false. So how should parents bridge this conversation with your kids? Check in with your children regularly. Don't be afraid to talk to them. Validate their concerns. Understand that it is very real for them. So you might have experienced stress and anxiety in a different way. Kids will always say, well, if I tell my mom about that, she'll tell me all the stuff that she had to do as a child, or my dad will tell me all the stuff they had to do as a child. But it is real for them. Help them get connected. So one of the best things that you can do is be connected with services, supports, whatever it is. You just want to have some sort of social connection to be able to kind of work on the anxiety. So I want to thank everybody for joining me, but I have some questions that people had asked, so I want to be able to make sure that I can answer those quickly for you. So some tips for social anxiety and shyness depression for a high school student. I think what I would do is I would try to foster something that they like. Is there anything that they take an interest in? And what is the anxiety and the shyness about? Oftentimes I'll hear from people, it's about them not looking like social media, or they're too big, they're not cute, they're this and that. And the thing that I always use is, um, I always tell everybody that Kim Kardashian and I are the same age, the same date of birth, everything. I look nothing like Kim Kardashian. Why? Because I'm natural. Kim Kardashian is not. Probably other reasons as well. I might have not had good enough stock. It's okay. But that is something where it's a very stark contrast where I can look at my kids and be like, pull up a picture of Kim Kardashian, and then you're looking at my face right now. Like, yes, this is different. So that is something that I think social media plays huge into some of the anxiety. And so it's kind of like even validating and letting them know that that's not really, that's not a reality. Kim Kardashians are not a reality coming out without plastic surgery. Um, so techniques. So can a female parent, when a student is directing their anger at them, and the only therapist they talk to is on maternity leave. So what I would say about that is, if the therapist is from an agency, I would see if you could talk to the therapist supervisor about what was working well. And if the therapist is not from an agency, is there anything that when things were going well for this kid, what that was about? And it could be the anxiety that they don't have the outlet of the therapist because they're on maternity leave. So is there anybody else that they feel comfortable with enough just to check in? And at this point, it's really holding this youth over and trying to figure out, like, who could they check in with? This is a lot more than I could probably answer in this time. So it would really be kind of reaching out to your resources and supports. And why will they only talk to that one person? What is it about that person that makes them feel so comfortable? Those would be questions that I have. And also, like, in what situations is this youth becoming physical? Is it like because it's a no, or is it from something else? Um So I had a question about connection between anxiety and screens. Are there developmental ages that are more prone to higher levels of anxiety? So screens are set, you go to the pediatrician's office and they're set to monitor, like, well, the screen time, if you're thinking of screen time, there's a huge correlation with it because nobody's the same. And then if you're thinking of like evaluations in screens from a PCP, there's two different things. Social media will definitely impact your anxiety. And if you're looking at pediatricians when you're going in and screening your kids on age appropriate things, there is research that indicates that like the kids going into college, young adults have a higher level of anxiety. There's also research that younger kids have a higher level of anxiety. To be completely honest with you, I would like to see some post-COVID research about anxiety, because I don't think that anything prior to COVID is really pertinent right now, because there's so much anxiety out there and stress for people. And then the difference between anxiety versus PTSD. PTSD is that there's been a traumatic event that makes you feel unsafe, and that is shaping the way you're viewing society. So it's an acute traumatic event that happened, and that shapes the way you view society, opposed to anxiety, which is there's just something that you're anxious about, and there's not that threat. PTSD also has intrusive thoughts. When a walk's not enough and you can't let kids punch into like punch a pillow at school, and they need to get their energy out and they're super anxious, what else can you do? I would say for youth like that, if you know there's going to be a day that they're anxious and they're going to have some stuff coming up, maybe kind of setting in proactive walks for them to kind of mitigate the high anxiety that they get, like really knowing what their triggers are and how to incorporate a more scheduled break rather than a break in a response to an anxiety attack or something that's going on that's making them anxious. And then I would also see if you could use any like grounding techniques, deep breathing, any meditation. Also, like, I know OT in schools is very helpful too sometimes when they have the ability to have that. And then the last question that we had was about OCD, stress and anxiety. So OCD is like a very, very severe anxiety disorder. And that's when I call it like getting off the wheel. Like people that I have with OCD, it's like it's a mouse on a wheel, and we have to kind of pull them out because they keep going on the repetitive thing. So it's when you have OCD, it's looking at the pattern of behavior and how can you disrupt that pattern of behavior to pull them out of the episode that they're experiencing the obsessive compulsive behavior in. Is there anything that I missed? And I thank you all so much for your patience and apologize about the technology. I usually do these in person, so I'm a lot better in person, I promise. But if there's any other questions or anything I can help you with, let me know. I did do a reference sheet that I'm gonna give Bree, and she will email it out to people. Just it basically has, the reference sheet has stuff like just local places for therapy, local places for, like, how you can refer kids to things and stuff like that if you need it. And I'm always available, so if there's follow-up questions or further things, we can reach out to me and I can certainly respond. I have no problem with that, and I appreciate you taking your time out on a beautiful night, because I don't know that we always get these beautiful nights. I think I will stop sharing.
If anyone has questions, feel free to ask, or if questions come up.
Charlene, you have your hand raised, or was it raised? Yes. You're on mute. You're muted.
It was a clap.
Okay.
If anyone has a minute, I just put a link in the chat. It's a evaluation form. We would appreciate any feedback. If you have a minute, you can just click on that link. I also shared in the chat a PDF of another event we have coming up on Monday, June 10th. The mediatrician who we had last year from Boston Children's Hospital to talk about screen time and how to navigate that over the summer months with your kids. So he'll be presenting with us on Monday, June 10th. But any other questions that come up between now and then, or if you have other questions you think about after the presentation, you can always send them over to me, and I can ask Nicole and get some more information for you. Any last minute thoughts, comments, concerns? All right, I'm gonna end this recording.